Hello chess friends and welcome to Out of Chess channel and welcome back to the FIDE Candidates in 2022. So we're following now the most important game from the round 9, and it's probably even the most important game from the whole event, and it's of course the game for the throne between Fabiano Caruana and Jan Nepomniachtchi, because before this round Jan had a comfortable situation, we have to say it. He had 1 point more than Fabiano, but still, if Fabi for instance wins this game, then he's the leader because he would then have better additional criteria. The most important additional criteria is of course the direct duel, and in the direct match Fabiano Caruana would be then better than Jan Nepomniachtchi. So it's, I think, really an important and critical moment of this tournament, because Hikaru Nakamura lost his game today against Teimour Radjabov with the black pieces, which means now that this is becoming basically a battle between Fabiano and Jan Nepomniachtchi. So let's check out now the game. It was a brilliant sharp attacking game played by both of them. So here e4 was played by Fabi. We have e5 by Jan Nepomniachtchi, knight to f3, knight to f6, the famous Petrov defense, the famous Russian game that Jan Nepomniachtchi many times now played, and also in this tournament he introduced us very nice and beautiful ideas of this opening. In the continuation here, Fabi simply took knight takes e5. We have d6, knight to f3, knight takes e4, and here after move d4, d5, we have reached now really the symmetrical position, which is now becoming even a more static position. The center is static, which means we cannot move pawns in the center. The position is not so dynamic, but white has always the opportunity to continue the pressure with the move bishop to d3, will attack further the knight on e4, and then continues with c4, continues the pressure against the knight on against the pawn on d5. Also then knight to c3, queen to b3 are opportunities. So it's a simple battle for the d5 square, but also against the knight on e4. Black, on the other hand, which is very good, I think, has a decent activity. The bishop can come here on d6, where it's controlling, of course, very important diagonals, and also this bishop is very active. We can also, from Black's perspective, include the queen into the game. The knight can also come into the game, so in the Petrov defense, in the Russian game, you have at least a good piece activity. Many times when you're playing with black pieces, you don't have sometimes such a good development. So the Petrov defense is perfectly fine. So in the continuation, we have bishop to d3. The normal idea, simply attacking the knight. We have bishop to d6, kingside castling also by Nepo. Now comes this main idea. So c4, d takes c4 is of course not possible because the pawn gets deflected from the defense of the knight. So we have c6, fixing simply further the center of the board, and now rook to e1. So Fabi continues the pressure against this outposted knight on e4. Nepo plays bishop to f5, which is normal idea here. Nepo continues his central grip around the square e4, which is very important to stay with this very powerful knight in the center of the board. Retreating is not an option here. If you play two passive moves, then white is suddenly developing the pieces in a much faster way. So that's why bishop to f5, very important move now in this moment of the game. So queen to b3. Fabi continues now the pressure against the pawn on b7, but also against the pawn on d5. The only good way to protect this is to play queen to d7. Now the b7 is covered, but c takes d5 is of course not an option, because after c takes d5, actually you cannot take, of course, the pawn, because you get this beautiful tactical shot, discovered attack, and the queen will be lost. So this is not an option. So here in the continuation, after move queen to d7, here Fabi introduced to us really a beautiful theoretical novelty. And when you put now this move into an engine, it will show you maybe that it's even in inaccuracy. But I really liked here Fabi's choice. Many times this position has been reached, and white played knight to c3, and similar ideas played also c takes d5. But Fabi played a very interesting knight to h4. And this is a perfect move, in my opinion. First of all, we're attacking the bishop on f5, which is controlling, of course, the e4 square, which is protecting the knight on e4. So, in my opinion, really a good continuation. Nothing wrong with this move. Fabi, I think, probably studied this move at home for sure. He had to surprise, I think, Nepo in some lines, because Nepo is really the master of the Petrov defense, and maybe he was familiar with this line, but maybe he didn't have such a deep preparation. So I think as a surprise element, this knight to h4 is perfectly fine. So here bishop to e6 by Nepo. We have queen to c2, getting out of this tactical mess. Although you can maybe continue here with the move knight to c3, then still d takes c4 is going to happen. You have to take now with the bishop to c4, queen to c4. The problem is now, you see the knight is a little bit loose on the board. If you take now with the knight to c3, this wouldn't be good maybe here for black. I wanted to show also a different line, of course, because many things can happen in this stage of the game. And from knight to c3, actually you are connecting here your opponent's pawns, and now suddenly white could have a central control with his pawns. And maybe if you retreat here to f6, then bishop to g5 is really unpleasant, because the bishop can take out the knight and mess up maybe the pawn structure. So here rook to d1 is an opportunity then to follow up with d5. So many opportunities, I think, here for white. So I don't think, as I said, that this knight to c3 is such a problematic move, but black has to react correctly here and has, of course, to play some good choices. So but as we said, Fabi played queen to c2. He didn't continue his pressure here with the move knight to c3. In the continuation, we have knight to a6 by Nepo. He's trying now knight to b4 to fork against the queen and the bishop, and you don't want to lose this bishop. This bishop is very powerful, because we have to also say this knight on e4, okay, it's temporarily there, but it's not going to stay there forever. With f3 we still will be able to kick it away, and then of course this long battery on light horse makes really sense. Then you have really some powerful opportunities in the continuation of the game. So after move knight to a6, so that's why a3 has to be played. We have f5, so Nepo fixes simply the further his pawn structure. He's fixing now his central grip around the square e4. We have knight c takes d5, c takes d5, and now knight to c3, simply developing the knight. So rook to c8 makes sense, of course, continue the pressure here on the c file. Here finally, as we said, after it is a good opportunity. Now the knight has to step back, but Nepo found even a better line, of course, bishop to e7, a beautiful counter attack here against the knight. So Fabi played g3, and we have reached now really the most dynamic stage of this game. This game is becoming now wilder and wilder. So far it was a positional struggle, it was a positional battle. You saw they basically played for one single square, but now the game is becoming more and more tactical. And we have seen also in the first game that Nepo and Caruana played already, where Caruana played with the black pieces, that actually I think Nepo lost a little bit the tactical battle against Caruana. Something like this will also happen, but if you are maybe having sort of an advantage in a tactical battle, then you have to keep it. Then you have to really push the best moves. You have to play really the most aggressive moves. g3 so far is perfectly fine. The knight is protecting. The problem for black, I think, here is that bishop to h4 is not so good. Maybe when it comes to computer relations it's solid, but when it comes to really positional struggle and positional understanding, I don't think that this is a good line for black, because look at this, g takes h4. Now you can maybe take knight takes c3, b takes c3, and look at this, f4 is not an opportunity because you lose the pawn on h7. I'm telling you this f4 move because what you want to get here, you want to lock somehow the dark bishop. If the dark bishop of white in this line gets into the game, then white has really a brilliant position. And you see f4 is not possible. Now white will continue with king to h1, rook to g1, will simply attack further the g file, will play bishop to f4, bishop to e5, and the moves are really easy now for white to play. Although this is maybe a messed up pawn structure, but now the bishops, I think, will have really fun in this position. So as I said, bishop to h4 is really not so good here for Jan Nepomniachtchi. So that's why after move g3, Nepo stepped back with knight to d6. We have queen to a4, and now comes maybe even the first sort of inaccuracy here by Nepo. He played here bishop to f6. He counterattacked here against the pawn on d4, but what he should have played actually is slightly better here, is maybe the move rook to c6. And the problem is now, you see, on the e file there are two loose pieces. There are two bishops that can be of course attacked. Here in the continuation, if for instance white takes out now the knight on a6, we can still play bishop to g4. Now this bishop to g4 makes sense, but look at this. Now after g takes h4, okay, we take, rook takes a6. Now after queen to d7, bishop to d7, okay, this is now a new position, but now at least in this scenario white doesn't have any more the bishop pair. In the previous line that we have analyzed, you saw the bishop pair was still on the board. The rook had some opportunities here to get on the g file. The queens were still on the board, so the game was much more complicated, and especially with the bishop pair, as I said, white could have really some fun, but not in this position, I think, because this is now a position where we have opposite colored bishops. Many times this game ends in a draw, so that's why here maybe with rook to c6, maybe Nepo could have forced really a wild drawish line. But okay, Nepo played bishop to f6, so he's not losing the game because he played this move. Still, he's activating these pieces, but maybe rook to c6 as a simplification idea, as we said, could have worked. So here Fabi simply takes, queen takes d7. In the continuation, bishop takes d7 was played. Even if you try here bishop to d4, sort of an intermediate check, it's not such a huge problem. Bishop to e3 can be played. Bishop takes e3, rook to e3. Okay, you take out the queen, but also the d5 pawn is hanging. f4 is not possible. The knight is controlling this square, so you would love, I think, from black's perspective, you would love to play the move f4, but so far it's not a possibility. So you see the rook is active on the e file. The knights are very, very well placed. Although this knight is on the edge of the board, but still it can be remaneuvered, and this knight will find opportunities in the game for sure. We can also play from white perspective some ideas of bishop to a6, doubling up the pawn structure, messing up the pawn structure. This is also, I think, perfectly fine. Also the fork is here a threat, so too many tactical threats here by white. So that's why after move queen to d7, we have bishop to d7 first. Now knight to d5, bishop to d4 also check. It's a different line now, but now after king to g2, we will reach now a new critical moment, because first of all here Nepo played the normal move to e8, competing here on the open file, on the e file, and here bishop to f4 by Fabiano Caruana, simply attacking now the knight on d6. And now Nepo makes sort of an inaccuracy. He played now the move knight to c5. I think he underestimated a little bit the threat of knight to e7 here by Fabiano Caruana, because after knight to e7 check also, then the pawn on f5 is hanging, and this is very, very important to say, because a better line here is to play knight to c8. It's a weird move to play the knight like this, but you have to play the knight like this in order to control the e7. Now in the continuation, white could maybe play bishop to c4, threatening some discoveries, but still the king can escape to h8. Now rook to d1, maybe attacking the bishop. Bishop can take, rook to b1, the bishop can take also this pawn, but now with the rook to b2, maybe white can activate now also the rook on the 7th rank. White still has a really good attacking formation, we have to say it. White pieces are much more active, but black still has this extra pawn on the a file, so maybe this is a position that black could survive. So, but after move bishop to f4, as we said, knight to c5 was played by Nepo, and now Fabi played knight to e7. After king to f7, now it was again a new critical moment of the game. Here Fabi had, I think, a beautiful opportunity to reach a powerful, really very, very nice position. He should have played bishop to f1. Unfortunately for him, he didn't play this. He played knight takes bishop to f5. He gave up his most powerful piece, I think, in the continuation. Look at this. If he would have played bishop to f1, then black has, of course, the opportunity to compete here with knight to c8, but now knight to f5 is actually working. Okay, black can again take this one. We can include the rook into the game. Takes, and now after a couple of trades, look at this. Still, you can, of course, also take out this pawn. It doesn't matter, but now look at this. With bishop to c4, this is really a wild position. In some lines, not immediately, but in some lines, black can even get checkmated if black isn't careful. So as I said, this is really a wild position. Fabi unfortunately missed this. I'm not sure what his calculations were, but here I think he could have simply kept the tension, and I think with some couple of more aggressive moves he maybe would have better opportunities to win the game, but he played the bishop to f5. Nothing wrong, he will not lose the game because he played this move, but it's slightly worse because now Nepo undermines the pressure, simply trades off this powerful bishop. Knight to f5, bishop to f5, knight to f5, and now rook to e1, rook to e1. This was now a good position for Nepo. We have rook to e4, and now Nepo simply traded off more pieces, grabbed also the pawn. Now Fabi also played bishop to e3, attacking this one. Nepo takes, Fabi also takes, and this is now a completely drawish endgame where both of them, of course, have the same pawn count. Maybe this is an annoying pawn because it can be attacked, of course, by white, but still it's a passer. It can be sometimes even a powerful passer, so both of them didn't want to risk anything anymore here in the continuation. Nepo tried rook to a8, the bishop to d4. We have bishop to f8. Now Fabi played rook to e2. Very important to compete here on the second rank, because in the near future maybe some ideas of rook to a2 could work here for black. So g6, kicking away the knight, knight to e3. Now Nepo simply continues the pressure. Knight to c4. We have rook to c6, rook to e4, protecting the knight. The knight is protecting also the bishop. We have bishop to g7, f4, rook to e6, king to f3, and now Nepo found this drawish line, some perpetual checks, because you can never really step back. If you do that, then of course the king gets deflected from the defense of the rook, and then the game is over. So knight to c2, a couple of perpetuals, and both of them agree to a draw. So okay, there were really some wild lines, but we have to say that really this were only some really wild Stockfish 15 lines. When we watched the game really in a deeper, really human analysis, I think this was a perfect game. Both of them played really solid chess, especially also Fabi found, I think, good improvements, kept the pressure. Unfortunately, he didn't see really the wildest line, but I'm not sure even then how the game would have ended, which means now that Nepo still has his extra point in front of Fabiano Caruana, and I'm not seeing good ways how Fabiano can catch up anymore with Nepo. This was now his only opportunity. Now he has to rely on some other players. Maybe Hikaru can maybe grab half of the point, maybe against Nepomniachtchi, maybe also some other players, but now Nepo has a beautiful position, and he is now really the favorite to win the whole thing. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game. Really interesting ideas again of the Petrov defense. You see how brutal this opening can become. Really wild stuff they played here in the game. If you want to see more games from this event, check out my coverage so far with some other great games that we have seen played by Hikaru Nakamura, Nepo, Fabiano Caruana, and many more. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.